Welcome to the CIRIS Roundtable Podcast, where we engage in dialogue on global security, international relations, other diplomatic issues, and how they impact our world. My name is Dominique Batiste, and I'm here to guide you through thought-provoking discussions with leaders and change makers shaping the future on an international scale. I have the privilege of sharing the hosting of the podcast today with Sergei Oudman, who is our president and one of the founders of our organization. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. In case you're not familiar with the term CIRIS, it stands for the Center for International Relations and International Security. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit research and policy organization. CIRIS operates as an independent think tank, assisting in bridging the gap between academic research and real-world solutions. Today, we'll be exploring the anti-corruption protests in Serbia and shedding light on those ongoing events. For our listeners who are not aware of what's going on in Serbia, let me give you a little bit of context. In November of 2024, a railway station canopy collapsed in the city of Novi Sad, Serbia, killing 15 people. The concrete canopy was renovated under poor conditions as part of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative project. Not only was the canopy's renovation believed to be shoddy construction work, but there has been consistent and growing issues with Serbian government officials with a lack of transparency and mismanagement on BRI projects in Serbia. Demonstrations were organized by students to bring awareness and accountability to Serbian government officials, lawyers, construction workers, teachers, farmers, and everyday people took to the streets in every corner of Serbia to protest the political system and their negligence. As of February 22nd, 2025, protests have spread to 276 of the 280 cities in Serbia, becoming the largest protest in Serbian history. First, let's start off by getting an introduction from our guest.
So my name is Ivana Stefanovic. I am from Serbia, but I am now living in the Netherlands. I'm doing a master's degree in arts, history, and culture of Asia, and another specialization in politics, society, and economy of Asia. I've been in the Netherlands for about 2 years, but I do go very often back to Serbia, and that's how I actually had, the opportunity to be part of the protest that we're going to be discussing today. And I'm very happy to be here today with you to share a little bit of, my perspective on everything that's happening.
Great, thank you.
And my name is Nela Jaja. I'm from Croatia. I am Serbian, but I grew up in Croatia. And now I'm also studying in Netherlands. I'm doing my bachelor at communication, international business communication. And I don't know, I think that's it, right? Yeah. And I've been living here this is my 4th year living in Netherlands.
Great.
And I think I want to do my master either here or England or maybe America.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, ladies, for being here with us. So we have a series of questions, and it came from the international community within our organization outside of it. So we're very glad that you came. So my first question for you is what motivated you to come to and join these particular protests? Like what specific thing or movement happened for you to say, okay, let me push forward on a call to action?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like the atmosphere has been kind of boiling, and a lot of things have been happening in the past few years, with a lot of scandals, with a lot of, injustice happening. And we did have a few protests like in 2022, I think, and in other years. And I personally was part of each and every one of those. So when this came about, my first initial thought was like, let's go, because I felt so happy to see that the students were taking matters into their own hands and, standing up for what they believe in and standing up for, justice. They want justice to be served. They want the institutions to do their jobs. And when I saw how passionate they were, I felt like there's no choice. I have to join them. I have to be part of this movement and provide my support. And, I feel also that this is long overdue, that all of the things that were happening, they're systematic. So they're pretty much just a result of the functioning or non-functioning of certain institutions that actually claimed the lives of 15 people. And I feel like that was when the majority of the population, students leading the way, saying, okay, this is enough. And yeah, I feel like I just instinctively supported it because I feel like it's long overdue.
Definitely agree with Ivana. I just think that Serbia has a huge problem, but it has for years now with their government, with people who are leading the country. And I think that students show how persistent they are in wanting to change something, and especially because this has been going on for months. Actually, I think this protest started over a year because Serbia had an incident with a school and there was a school shooting, and then the whole protest starts, and Western media are not paying attention to any of that. And I think that by showing how students or like how Balkan people or whoever comes to these protests, for example, in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, they show that Western media, they show Dutch government, for example, okay, there is something going on in Serbia. And I think I personally joined because I want more and more people to be in these protests. So all the media and everyone in the whole Europe knows that, okay, we need to at least record this. I think by recording it, by putting it on social media, the people get aware of what's happening, and maybe something can change. Because so far nothing is changing. Because I think that Europe is very satisfied with having Vucic on, having current government leading the Serbia because it's because of their own beneficial stuff. Yeah, and I think we need to stop that.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely understand that. And the media coverage has been very
Yeah,
shoddy over the past year or so. There have been 64 presidential elections just in 2024, and very little media coverage has been on the protests in Serbia. I
almost
briefly saw something in
nothing.
Belgrade. Very. So, my question to you, because we definitely want to get this out, as far as you know, what are the main demands from the student movement on the Serbian protests?
Where,
Well, the student
yeah,
organizations, I feel, have very like transparent demands. And they're saying, okay, we want transparency in the documentation of the incident that happened in Novi Sad, the railway station canopy collapsing. They want all of the documentation because this railway station was actually recently renovated. So how did it actually collapse after being renovated? Who was involved? The building companies, did they actually, take precautions? Did they do it as they should have? But because there's not like access to the general public to the documents, students are demanding that as their first, demand. The second one is actually the people who were attacking the professors and attacking the students to be, prosecuted. So on the one hand, we want, people who were violently acting towards peaceful protests to be, persecuted. And then we have the other side, the people who are wrongfully persecuted for political motivations, the students like peacefully protesting to be, let go. And I think the last demand is increased funding for the universities in Serbia.
yeah.
So when I tell you these demands, they're not something crazy. The students are not asking for, I don't know what. They genuinely just want justice, and they want, peace, and they want something to change, and the institutions that are in charge of actually doing their due diligence with this to carry it out and not just talk about it, but actually look into this case and tell the public why it happened and who's to blame.
Mm, okay. It looks like there's a need for transparency and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But that's it. But they're not giving it.
Mm,
No, because we, I think even I don't know if you were there, Sanya, but even we met in Amsterdam during a protest over there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the main features of these protests is that they're very peaceful. They're
Yeah.
very social, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at how they're taking place, of the images that I can see from Serbia as well, despite that, there is absolutely no reaction officially from the Serbian government whatsoever when it comes to these protests, because we don't see anything over here in the news.
not here
Mm-hmm.
either. We don't
No.
see anything here. We don't.
Well, interesting things were happening because some of the documentation was actually given to the students, and I think people who were at the architectural university, I might I might be lying. I think it's a university that deals with construction.
Yeah, I also
That
think
went
it's
over the documents.
aviation.
Architecture. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
so.
yeah.
They went over the documents and they realized you didn't give us the full documentation. You only gave us like the documents that seem in order. And then they had a list of all the documents that are missing, asking where did they go? If you are going to provide the documentation, why are you hiding certain documents? You know, is there something to hide? And I feel like that led to an increase of suspicion, because if you are going to be completely truthful, you give the whole documentation. But also the response is also like kind of weird, because I think there was a recent meeting, I think in Jagodina maybe, or another city in Serbia, where Vucic was talking about how he's gonna write a book, how he managed to stop the cultural revolution in Serbia.
Yeah.
That is a
And
wild statement to say. And it's like they're signaling how they're victorious, and they're obviously all the news stations that are connected to the government are saying that the protests are just a few people who don't know what they're doing or what they believe in. They can't even like formulate their demands. The demands are very clearly formulated. And there was 100,000 people in Slavia. 100,000. The news channels said that it was only a few thousand. And it's just, there's a lot of information manipulation happening, because a lot of the people don't have access and do not actually consume media that is not the mainstream media, or the regime controlled media, as we would call it in Serbia. So they are playing with the information, and with playing with the information, they're kind of switching the narrative. So I believe that there are people in Serbia who believe that these protests are just happening because people don't have anything better to do.
that's because the whole media is controlled by the government that's right now with SMS and Vucic of Serbia, and everything that they didn't even put protests up until what, like few weeks ago on the like television of Serbia. It's been going on for months and months, and the problems, and people will be talking about it, and even other countries have been started reporting it before Serbia did, about their own country, about their own protests. And Vucic did say on a few press conference or on the media that it'd be like, what, 100, 200 protests. And like Ivana said, it was 100,000 people. And it's been coming, and people have been walking for hours and days from one city to another.
Mm.
And the government is basically just denying it. And
Wow.
that's the
Well,
whole problem. Yeah.
I will say, as of February 22nd, which was I'm in the United States. So as of yesterday, 276 of the 280 cities in Serbia have been identified as cities that are in active protest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the kind of information that we want to make sure that we get out. And these are not just, we understand it is a student movement, but these are people from all different segments of society. You have lawyers out there, farmers, construction workers have walked off of the job to protest and support.
Yeah.
So I'm
Mhm.
very, this is information that definitely needs to get out. Now it definitely aligns with what you mentioned, and I have a question for you in reference to it. How is it possible to get that information? Are you using another source like alternative media, like YouTube? Are you going through Instagram? How are you able to get information from there to where you are now in Amsterdam?
Well, I personally, there is this non-profitable like site on Instagram, and they have more than 250,000 followers, and I think students made it, and then they're reposting everything. Okay, today we are meeting there and there. They're reposting about everywhere in the world, where, like for example, also Amsterdam, Rotterdam, when they have protests, and they are doing collaboration with a lot of other non-profitable organizations who are posting about it. But I like my whole knowledge is through social media or through N1, which is in the Balkans. You have a TV program which is not, the owner is not from Serbia or Croatia, and that's why I think it's allowed from there to post it and to talk about protests. But even there, you don't get the full picture because, of course, it's censored, and I
Mm.
think they're also for them it's beneficial if they don't say everything, because yeah, that's how it works, the politics and the media.
Is there any
Yeah.
uncensored information coming via regular legacy media in Serbia at all?
Well, I would say that the irony is that there are news channels, the mainstream news channels present at the protest. But what is happening is
Yeah.
they come and then they find a place when there's least people. Like if there's 100 people there, but two there, they're going to film the two people and say, you see, they organized a protest, but only two people showed up. And actually, there were videos of people approaching these news channels saying, what are you doing? Go away, because they're actually just playing with the information and kind of just picking and choosing what shots to take to make it look as though the people are not there. But I also feel like every news channel will have their biases, and you have to be very
Yeah.
cautious in how you consume media. But the fact that we only have, maybe one or two networks that are kind of less biased towards the regime is sad. And I feel like I agree with Sonia. The majority of the information I get is from social media, because you see people on the ground filming things. You see them, talking to each other on Twitter. And there's a lot more people that are like into doing detective things
Yeah.
than you would think. So, like, they are doing investigative journalism by themselves because they want this out there. So they, provide us with the information, and it's up to us to, apply some critical thinking when watching either the, mainstream news channels or the alternative ones. There's always a narrative being portrayed. So I feel like it's kind of hard to distinguish, but yeah, social media does aid in that because it's kind of an uncensored, real, on the scene broadcast of what is happening.
And is there
Yeah.
then a generational gap then as well? Because I think the younger generations are very, very versatile in accessing
Absolutely.
social media, but the older ones are not.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yep.
definitely there's a big generational gap because not everyone are on social media. But citizen journalism is the only thing that's I think left for Serbian people or for whoever who wants to join the protest outside of Serbia, because it was also proven that the political party where our current government is, they were sending messages to students or putting like flyers and saying whoever is a student or looks like a student, they would pay them for them to come to, let's say, Pink RS, which is like TV, and then they say they have to say that they don't agree with protests, and they would get paid for that. And they wanted to fake basically the data and show to world, okay, there's so like Vucic and his government wanted to show the world that there is so many students who agrees with actual his regime and doesn't support protests, but he couldn't find it, so he had to post stuff and ask people to pay like for money to actually take it. But it still he doesn't succeed because I think people are just angry, beyond sad, betrayed, and everything. And I think it's no matter what your position is or who do you vote for in general, I think they all just want change because it's been too much.
I feel like it's so detrimental because I feel like these people are not people who want bad for their fellow citizens or the future of the country. These people are older people, the majority of them living in maybe rural areas where these news channels that we mentioned aren't even available. Like you don't even have it on your TV to watch this alternative network, and the information they're being served, imagine being a 70-year-old grandma. You don't believe the government is lying to you. You want to believe what people are telling you. And you think the people on the TV are people who are, there because they have studied a lot, because they're, well versed in a certain topic, a certain issue. But that is not the case, And I even had like a situation where I was really shaken up because my grandma is pro Vucic. And, she was calling me one day and she was telling me, oh, watch out, don't go to Slavia. There are protests there. They're very dangerous, The protests are peaceful, and like I'm part of it. Like if in that case, I'm the danger for walking, and for like showing my support. And then she said, and also there are people like jumping on cars because there were a few examples of people actually being, driven over because they were peacefully protesting. Some people seemingly had things to do. And then you have this image of like a girl who she was a student and she was protesting. She was on the sidewalk. and there was a car that literally slammed into her, carried her on her roof, and then she fell off of it. And then my grandma told me people are jumping on cars, because that's what the mainstream media is telling them, that these protests are crazy and they're like wanting to jump on cars to make a scene. And I told her, but grandma, there's a video of it. It's been recorded. You can see the moment where this man purposely drives into this student. And she's like, well, no, and that's not what I heard. And I'm like, but there's a video. You can see it. And then she said, I don't want to see that, like, a horrifying thing. Like, she doesn't want to see somebody getting ran over, but then she cannot confirm the validity of the statement that people are jumping on cars. So there's a lot at play. And I feel like my grandma is not a person that wants, bad for the students, but she's like deeply misinformed. And she's trusting in the people she sees on the TV, because she's used to people being on the TV being figures who you can believe. But that is not the case nowadays in Serbia. So the older generations, I feel a lot of them are like my grandma, who just believe whatever the president is saying. And when I say the president is saying, I'm saying that because he shows up on the news channels so much.
Oh, so
He
much.
has appearances every day, every other day. Why is the president of the country making random appearances and late night TV shows, chatting with some figures from the folk scene of Serbia? Like, what are you doing?
The same
So
guy, yeah, the president of Serbia is appearing to those late night shows and saying that he will be slightly happier if he had nuclear weapon and in his arm, if he had access to it. And he's just saying stuff like that, appearing to those TV shows talking about pop stars or like folk singers. That's all, like that's mostly what he does on these TV shows, thinking he can change the world.
Which
Yeah,
is which is interesting, because the only thing the students are doing are protesting peacefully.
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
Bush is notorious for having an outrageous past. And that is common knowledge. We are fully aware of that. So it's almost like his intent is obvious to the knowledgeable. And
Yeah.
there is a definite generational gap. You have that pre-Soviet Union collapse generation, and then you have now. So there is a huge gap. We've seen it in Ukraine and Russia.
I think those people are also scared to protest because they've been voting for the same party for over the years, and it's also very known that the older you get, the harder it is to change opinion of elderly, and I think they just wanna believe that those people are doing right because the whole life they've been thinking, oh yeah, that party or those people have been doing right, and now I think they just also don't wanna believe that it's all like that. They're scared and they're also very much manipulated by everything. Yeah.
Two aspects when it comes to this. First, the past that you mentioned, when we have a person who is a known radical, who changed his beliefs and now is, pro-democratic leader
Yeah.
that has the media controlled and that commits electoral fraud and that still has certain sentiments that he's spewing, which kind of showcase a little bit of kind of covert ethno-nationalism, but done in a like tasteful way. So I feel like, having somebody like that in power, he's playing by the same playbook that the people from the 90s, the political kind of leaders were. And he's following it. He was taught by those people. He was their protege. So it's hard even for him. Okay, it's hard for the grandmas and grandpas to change what they're voting for, but it's hard for him to change who he is and what his politics are because he's used to playing dirty. He was raised in a regime where it was normal to play dirty, and that's what he does now. And I feel like another aspect is because we were also discussing, people who still go out and vote for him or don't want to change and this and that. We don't even know how many people are voting because there's been such widespread voter fraud that we don't even know. Like, we don't have accurate data. You have people who have died, I don't know how many years ago, receiving ballots. You have people who are not living in certain buildings. Like, if you live in a building, you know who your neighbors are. And there are ballots for people who have not been living there or have never lived there ever to show up to the Belgrade election. Then you have groups where you're being paid, like you have a daily like salary if you recruit people to go out and vote. And all you have to do is take a picture of your ID
Yeah.
with the choice that you made, and you need to submit it to the headquarters, and then you'll receive your payment. We're talking about like fraud. We're talking about somebody manipulating the elections to stay in power. This
But
is
that's
not
not
a
even,
democratic country, That's not how it's supposed to be.
But also the border with Bosnia is being open when the elections are, because a lot of Bosnia, like she said, they pay people from Bosnia or any neighbor countries or part of Kosovo. They pay them to travel. You have to take a picture who you vote for, and then you go back. And it's a whole day trip. Everyone are talking about it. And the problem is that everyone knows every election it has been robbed. Everyone votes. For example, in address where I live, maybe 10 people been addressed to. They have been sent to my address to vote. Imaginary people, dead people, everyone, like she said. But it's also happening in the neighbor countries, not as bad as in Serbia. But that's why I think it's going and no one is saying anything about it because it became kind of normal thing. But it's
Yeah.
also sad.
Because of course it's easier to fake paper and to like manipulate everything that's going on in this way, and they're used to doing it because they do it all the time. But that's the thing that saddens me most about this is that this isn't just the two of us talking, just because we heard something from someone. There's recordings. There are people who actually, pretended that they're part of the party and asked about, how much are we going to get paid? When do we need to be there? Blah, blah, blah. And it's all on video. It's not like this is like covert. This is happening behind the scenes. They're playing in our faces. And I feel like that's also part of why the general public is so kind of fed up, because you don't even have the decency to try to do it, in a way where people won't know. No, you're doing it publicly and you're making us feel stupid. You're making a fool out of us for believing in democratic elections and for believing in our institutions actually working. And, just recently, I think a month ago, there was a big gathering in Jagodina to show support. It was pretty much a contra protest. I don't know what it's called, because one was organized in Belgrade and he organized another one at the same time in Jagodina to show support, overwhelming support for him. When I was walking to the protest in Belgrade, I saw at least 10 buses, Nisha Express buses, that were saying like, this ride is free. They were picking up people from Belgrade to drive to Jagodina so there can be more people at the protests. And then there was actually a reporter who went to Jagodina and started going around and asking, so where are you from? Because, like, why would there be people from Belgrade in Jagodina just to show support, But, like, people were avoiding the questions. People were running away. There were some people that were just happy to be there and just happy to get the money, that they were just outing themselves and outing the whole, like, situation. And then Vučić had the audacity to say that there was, like, I don't know how many thousands of people at that protest, at that meeting. And then he would say the meeting in Belgrade, oh, not that many people.
But it's been pretty wild also for the election is they don't want to do it electronically. Also, I don't think they can. But it's because most of the voters who vote for the current government are old people or people who are uneducated and they don't see the media. They're easy to manipulate. And I think that's why he also likes it, that it's with paper because it's easier, like she said, like Ivana said, it's easier to fake it. And I think for those people, if it would be online, they wouldn't even do it. They don't know how to do it.
Which is
to
interesting because Serbia wants to join the European Union. I mean, it's been talking with Brussels for a very long time, but when you
very, very long time.
Very long time.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you listen about these stories, I would almost say that, like, it seems as if corruption has been normalized to such an extent that even and Sonia, you both say it's not even, people are not even bothering anymore to hide it. It's just plainly in the open, and it's been normalized. And it's, I would say, the absurdity that Brussels on that end doesn't even really respond to any of this.
But there were reports that were commenting on how, the EU is concerned about the state of the free media or the lack thereof. And, there are reports occasionally coming out because we're still trying to get into the EU, or at least saying that we're trying. But when you take a look at the steps that our government is actually taking, are we even trying at all? It seems as though we want to be seen as wanting to be part of the European Union without actually doing the work, because that work entails, I would say, for example, free media. But if you have the free media, Vucic will probably not be in power if people see what is happening, and if they actually get all the information that they need. But also with the voting, we have people who do not know how to read going to the polls and voting for, which is being paid. They have to have video, kind of tutorials on who, because they cannot read, they need to be told the number that they need to, circle and
Yeah, when I
everything.
went to vote, it was a whole line of people, and they were like, and there was a female person who was telling them, "Okay, vote number two," and it was for his party. Just vote it, and they just go there. They circle number two because they don't know how to read. I
Yeah.
just want to say that with European Union, I definitely agree with what Ivana said, but I also feel like European Union has benefits from Serbia not being part of the European Union. For example, Spain doesn't want them because if Serbia approves Kosovo, they also have to approve Catalonia. There's also people with bad corruption like Bulgaria, Romania, and they're also in European Union, and no one can explain it why. I feel like corruption is huge everywhere. Some countries hide it way better than Serbia does, but for example, Croatia also doesn't hide it, and we're also in European Union. Not doing the best in European Union, but we are here for like since 2013. Yeah.
Yeah. So is it, do you see any changes in the new generation with regard to corruption? It's because it's mainly the students right now that are protesting.
I
Yes.
think I do see it, but it's also very easy to go the other way. If you see, sometimes it's sad to be the bigger person in countries like ours because you do everything by the rules, and then at the end you don't get the job because someone whose sister or aunt is in political party, they know someone, they do it, and then you come to the least point. You did everything correct. At the end, you don't get a job or you don't get whatever you need for because someone did it with a dirty way, and then you feel miserable because like, oh my god, my whole life I'm gonna do it like better way, the right way. I'm gonna be a bigger person, but then you will reach a point to be like, for what? The whole government is messed up. Everything around me doesn't follow the rules. Why would I? I think there
Yeah.
is a huge change between older generations and now. I think the progress is definitely here, but it's going too slow. And even if new government, because everyone knows that even if the new government came today, then they have years and years, like 30 years of dirt that has been with this government done to change it, and you cannot change anything overnight. And all these people who were in charge before, when this government was, let's say, at the at power, they will still have some influence. They will have money, and everything at the end revolves around the money, around the power.
Which explains probably also the brain drain. I mean,
Oh, the
I
brain
mean,
drain is just,
you're
yeah,
talking to
we did
us.
it.
We represent that, and I feel
Yeah.
like I have so many friends back home who I talk to who would do anything to have the opportunity to go away. And that shows how much this country has made people believe as though there is no better tomorrow. The situation just seems so hopeless to so many people that you have, for example, my mother was pushing me to go away, and then when I thought about it, I was like, imagine what it takes for a mother to kind of force her child to go away from her. Like, she wanted me to have a better life that she didn't think I could have within the system that Sonia described. So she would rather not see me and know that I'm like in a country that does things by the rules than me being with her but living under the current system that Serbia is operating under. And my friends are asking me, can I visit you? Do you think there's a chance I could get a visa? Can you help me? Can you this? Can you that? I think like half of the population of young people in Serbia have thought about or are still considering moving abroad. What does that say about the states? Unemployment is big. You get employed if you're part of the regime. If you don't want to risk your morals, chances that you'll get a job are a bit less. If you don't have somebody, a relative or a good connection, are you going to get the job? Everything is done, and that's the thing. As we said, it's so deeply rooted, and it kind of seeped into every single aspect of daily life and life in general, society in Serbia. The institutions, the jails, the police. If you have a connection, you're good. If you want to go see a doctor and you have an emergency, you're going to be put on the waiting list. But if you know somebody there, you can call and you're just going to, skip the line and go there. That's how it works. And that's how
But the
it's
health
been
system,
working.
the healthcare, that's horrible. Yeah, like she said, even if you're dying, you can get a waiting list in 5 years. And they're gonna be like, yeah, okay, 2030, you can check yourself for cancer. And but if you know someone, or if you're a friend of someone, or if you have money, and you mostly have money if you're part of the regime, then you can get it that day immediately. And the brain drain is huge just because of that. I feel like the quality of life the differences are huge, and I don't think any of the students would love to go outside of their country. I think they just need to, and I think both me and Ivan are very blessed that we had opportunity and supportive parents to go abroad. But like she knows, I also know so many people who don't have the opportunity or don't have supporting families, don't have anything to bounce back to go abroad, because it's also not easy to just move to a country you don't know the language, you don't know anything. Also, especially if you're Serbian, you cannot get job that easily if you're Serbian, because none of the places, for example, Netherlands, it's very hard to get a job if you're not part of EU, because they have to pay a bigger tax on you, and the companies usually don't like that, and there's a whole procedure. You have to pay scholarship of 13,000 euros if you're Serbian. Meanwhile, if you're Croatian, your scholarship is 1,000 euros. Like you really need to be either wealthy or have good support system or be extremely smart to go abroad, and we still have huge brain drain. Or people just go work. Half of the Germany speaks one of our languages from Balkans or from ex-Yugoslavia, just because people they wanna see bread. They wanna, I don't know, they just wanna go for a better life. And then they all come back once they get the money, which is also not the solution. Because all the smart people go, they maybe even marry with, or they stay in those countries, and then the Serbia, Croatia, and all those countries are left with either poor people or old people.
A lot of that going away abroad is done through like very kind of complex networks, because this going abroad, especially to Germany, has been happening for decades now. But it's
Oh yeah.
also sad because those men, it's usually men or nurses, for example. That's also a very popular profession to go to Germany. But the people, the guys who go, they usually work in, with cars or with construction and things of the sort. So they go to Germany for 3 months, work every day, and then they go back to Serbia after 3 months to see their children. And I know so many cases of my friends whose parents go abroad and they don't see their parents for months at a time. And they're doing that. They're alone in a foreign country doing a job that's very physically, demanding, just so they can put food on the table, go back and provide their children with like a semblance of a normal life and a good like living standard. But then again, those children are not seeing their parents, their father is abroad, they don't have contact with them that often, and I feel like it's also kind of destructive, and it's sad that somebody has to go to a foreign country and not see their family for a while just so they can survive, and yeah, I agree with everything Sonia said when it comes to, brain drain and the EU. For my university, I think doing a master's at Leiden is 23,000 euros per year for
And
you to
just
study at the university.
and just for those that don't realize it, that are gonna watch this, what is the annual average yearly income in Serbia?
Oh, but that's also a very interesting thing, because whenever I want to speak about this issue with people, I Google it, obviously. But then it
Mhm.
shows me a number that is kind of suspicious. But then I realize the people who are paid by the government and who have a lot of like income kind of boost the average. Whereas I would say like that an average like person working, like for example, let's say as a teacher, would have maybe 700, 750 a month, and that's like on the better side. You have
Yeah.
people
That's
who
not
work
even a
for
bad
maybe,
salary.
no, that's a good salary in Serbia. 750 a month is like good, but I think that there are people who work for maybe 500 euros a month, and they're supposed to, They have families. They're supposed to put food on the table. Lord forbid they want to, maybe travel or have some fun. You don't have enough money to like live a fulfilling life because you're only thinking about what am I going to eat the next day? What am I going to do the next day? You have to be cautious. You have to always kind of be on standby and kind of fear for tomorrow because your
Yes.
salary is so miserable. I'll Google it now to see what Google
Mhm.
says, but my experience would be around the 700 ballpoint, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think, like she said, the normal person, if you're a teacher, it's I think even 600 euros, if not less. It depends, right? But around 500, 600 euros per month a person gets. And imagine you have two children, which is very common. In Serbia, you have to feed them, they have to go to school, they have to do stuff. You're basically just working to survive. There is nothing fun, and that's how also people get unhappy, and that's why they go. That's I think that's why people either join the regime or start being part of the government political party. It's because they're so sad, or they're just they have their fear. They have fear of being poor, or fear that their children won't have anything to eat tomorrow, and then they put their morals aside and then just join the party. Did you find maybe was a
Yeah,
look into
it says
websites?
900. Yeah, it says 900, which still is not a lot, especially because prices in Serbia have been going
Oh
crazy.
yes.
Like we're paying like more than, for example, in Germany for certain products, and our salaries are way
Yeah.
less. Okay, maybe drinks at the bar are cheaper, but also everything else crazy expensive. But yeah, it says 900, and it says that the minimum wage is around 600.
What about the opposition? What are your thoughts on the opposition in Serbia?
Not existing.
Like,
Oh, it's pretty clear.
yeah, I know, right?
I mean,
Is
it
there an
does
opposition?
technically exist. Technically, it does, but how active they are and how passionate they are is up for debate because I feel like they have not been able to unite against, the ruling party, and they just don't. I feel like they're showing kind of a lack of care for the people because people do go out and vote for the opposition parties as well. They're very present at the alternative news station that I talked about. They do like performances and they openly criticize, the government. But when it comes to actual change, what are they doing? And I feel like the very important thing to say about these protests is that they are not affiliated with a political party. Students are really, really clear, making it clear that they don't want to be. This isn't supposed to be a political overthrow the government movement. It's not. The students are saying, listen, we're peacefully protesting for change and accountability for the injustice that happened, and we want the institutions to do their job. They're not calling for I don't know what, but also there are people from the general public that are joining them with maybe the hopes of it happening, but the students themselves do not carry that sentiment with them. So there were instances of certain oppositional leaders showing up to the protests, and they were like peacefully and very in a kind way told to go away because they don't want the oppositional parties to kind of take credit for the movement that's happening and kind of use it for their political gain, because the students are very passionate about keeping it only about the injustice, only about accountability and transparency, and not tangling and mingling from oppositional members who might like spin the narrative or take credit for something that was done by the students themselves.
Okay, so if the opposition is not really present, okay, when it comes to the
No, for the
protest.
protests, no. In general,
Mhm.
also they are not big. But it's how can you don't see I don't think they see anything positive coming out of this, like let's say political party wise. If they come, like I mentioned, they're gonna have 30 years of dirt to cover up. Also, I think they're also scared for their life. It's very popular. There is something called Serbia Mafia,
Mm-hmm.
which has been proven that a lot of people who try to either candidate against Vucic or candidate not necessarily for a president but have any influence in opposition except him, they've been either killed or disappeared, or they've been not present anymore on political scene.
Okay, so what about the international response then? So if the opposition is not present, what have you seen as far as the international response to the protest?
Like we said, no one knows about it. I mean, I feel like, yeah, I think the biggest problem is that people around the world are not educated enough about it because their television is not presenting to them, or their media. Also, I don't think we're some popular country. Let's say if this thing was happening in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Netherlands, I think it would be totally different story because these countries have been more popular in general, let's say, especially with youth, if you talk about sport or like vacation, or they know famous people from it, or politics, they don't know about Macron, Angela Merkel, you know some people, like, or you at least know some names. We are a very small country in Eastern Europe. They don't see us, I feel like, even as important as other countries in Europe, especially outside of the Europe. And I think also the big problem is that a lot of other political parties in other countries, or let's say EU, they don't, but for them it's like I mentioned, it's beneficial. For example, Serbia is not part of EU, so I don't think they even wanna report it, or they don't just simply think it's important enough to do it. Maybe they're also not positive, maybe they think it's not gonna be changed. And I also think that Vucic is controlling half of that media, or having a deal with some companies or how or television houses or brands, and that he's paying them up, so they are not saying anything about it.
Especially in the international actors, they've been witnessing what was happening, but all they do is just, oh, we've documented this happening. The end, and I feel like it's the same thing when we had the conversation at the beginning with you saying that you're a bit critical of the UN. It's the same thing. We are noticing this is happening. We are noticing the conflict in Israel and Palestine. We condemn it. Okay, and what now? And I feel like people know what's happening, but also it serves their interest, especially when it comes to, for example, I don't know if you're aware of the whole scandal that was happening with Rio Tinto back
Yes,
and like a few
definitely.
months ago, years ago. And it's still happening, it's still part of the discourse because people are against lithium mining in Serbia. It's going to destroy the rivers. It's going to destroy people's, homes, sources of income. People are forced to, resettle and everything. And we know that is going to be an ecological disaster. So rightfully so, people go out on the streets and say, listen, we do not want this company that has had a bad rep for a long time for destruction of, ecology and like general, whatever they touch, they destroy ecologically. And it's well known. And then for the government to be so open to working with them and saying, they said officially that they halted the kind of process of them actually doing the lithium mining, but we know that they didn't. We know that this is somehow gonna play out in a certain way, and that they are gonna end up mining, because we feel like these agreements have been signed behind closed doors and are not available for us, and that a lot of other actors are involved that we can't even begin to suspect. But also, Germany, for example, has reserved of lithium. They don't want to mine it. So why wouldn't we mine in this little small country that's been controlled by the same regime from the 90s? Not the same person, but the same, sentiment, the same, political view since the 90s. Let's use it. And that's why we have, for example, a lot of Chinese companies and Korean companies and whatever outsourcing their labor, building companies here and abusing the workers. There was a scandal. I think the name of the company, it was a Korean company called Yura. These people were made to wear, diapers to work. They had crazy hours and were not compensated, as they should have been. And when I tell you this is happening in Europe. This shouldn't be happening anywhere, to make it clear, but like you are used to hearing these problems happening in certain other parts of the world. This is happening literally a 2-hour flight from Amsterdam. People are wearing diapers in a factory, and it's like people are not aware of that. And that's why I feel like a lot of the West is kind of seeing Serbia as the other, like as in
Yes.
like Edward said, like Orientalism. I feel like Serbia and the Balkans are kind of the Orient of Europe, because we're not really Europe. We're geographically part of it, but we're culturally different, and we're so different in terms of power. So I feel like that's why it's such a fertile ground for international actors to kind of, spin things and use things and kind of save their country from having to mine lithium or having these factories that are so, causing such pollution, when they can just do it in Serbia. That's very close and is down to, kind of make a deal with them for a certain profit, of course.
I think all of
Well,
those
there,
things also play into the reason why China has such a footing in Serbia with the China Belt and Road Initiative, because you do not
Yeah.
have these additional other elements and you do not have that level of international respect. So I get that. With that being said, what are you expecting long term from not necessarily the Serbian government, but what are you expecting long term with these active protests that have taken over the country? What kind of change are you expecting long term if we're being optimistic? Being and knowing that China's Belt and Road Initiative is right at your back door and has all of these projects actively going on in Serbia.
well,
Mm.
I certainly, if I'm gonna be optimistic, I certainly hope the government's gonna go down. We're gonna have new elections eventually, not now because now they're not and not even beneficial for us as we don't have opposition and many other things. But I feel the only positive outcome would be new government and of course doing everything what students have been asking to do. But I'm not sure that I'm that positive about everything because I think the whole world I feel like the government or European Union, they know what's going on. They just don't want to put it as big of an issue or they don't want to present it in media. I think they're, like I mentioned, they have profit from this. And we had similar situation 1999 with Milosevic. And just because he was not as interesting for Western media. Like we got help from Western civilization and EU. Now things are different, and Serbia is also a known country. And I think something definitely is gonna change. I don't think people are gonna quit because it's been going for way too long, and people are hyped to protest. And I think they're also angry, and they don't wanna anymore stay in this. Youth, elderly, everyone, students, farmers, but I don't know how big of a change at the end
Bit
gonna
of a
be.
more optimistic, viewpoint, because I feel like the sole fact that this is happening is already showing something. The fact that 100,000 people will show up on the streets is saying that these people have gained kind of a deeper awareness of what's happening and how dangerous it is and how they want to stop it, especially because the younger generations are kind of less reliant on news channels like TV stations and newspapers. They like consume a lot of media and kind of see different viewpoints. I feel like there's more of an awareness of the corruption of the government happening, and I feel like we can kind of, we mentioned Milosevic, and the same generation of people who are coming out to support the students are the same generation who was there on the 5th of
Yes,
October when Milosevic was, kind of, how do you say,
take it down.
when,
Yeah.
yeah, no, when power was taken away from him.
Oh yeah,
And I feel like these people had it in them to ask for change then, and these people are the ones who raised the students who are now on the streets, and it's the same sentiment. It's something you take from home as well, when your parents are constantly telling you about how bad it was in the 90s and what to look for and what the patterns are. You now see, wait a minute, all of these patterns that, for example, my mom talked about, I see them now, and I feel like the sole fact that so many people are on the streets now is a change in itself, because the protests were never as big and they never encompassed so much of society. It was usually, okay, maybe just the agricultural workers or just the students. Now everybody's united. You go to the protest, you see people from, you see a 3-year-old child with their mom, and then you see a 75-year-old grandpa just marching with the students. It's the whole of society united, and we have not stood united for a long, long time. And you know
Yeah,
how
that's
bad it
true.
has to be for the whole society to unite and say, okay, we're going to march for freedom. So in my mind, the fact that this is happening is optimistic. Now, I'm not nearly as educated or, smart enough to tell you, okay, this is going to happen afterwards. There are a few options, and some people have different opinions on where it's going to go. Is it just going to continue like this for Lord knows how long? Is the government actually going to head back with a bit more like an aggressive approach? Because we did have that. I think it was the COVID protests. Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong, where we had people beating up on the streets. They were.
Yeah.
There was this infamous video. I don't know if you are aware of it, where there was, I think, 3 guys sitting on a bench near the National Assembly drinking beer,
Yeah,
and then all
yeah,
of a sudden these policemen run up to them. They're literally doing nothing. They're just sitting there and drinking a beer, and they start hitting them with their, I don't know what they're called, but
The baton.
batons,
Yeah,
the
Uh-huh.
baton. Yeah, and
yeah,
they're
yeah.
they're striking them over the head, and they're trying to protect themselves, but they are very surprised what is happening. I had a similar experience when I was at the protest with my friends, and we were away from the action. Like we were went to the protest, decided to go to a park to kind of get out of the crowd and kind of maybe take it easy. It was like maybe 10 of us sitting on a bench, and all of a sudden I look down, I'm taking something up from my purse. I look up and everybody started running, and I'm like, what is happening? I turn my head and I just see 10 policemen, full gear, just like heading straight towards us, like running full speed. We're like, at that point, I think we were maybe 21, and we're
Mhm.
sitting in a park and we're just drinking beer and talking. We're not even at the protest at that point. We're just at a random park, and they're charging towards us. Like, what are you charging at us for? If
Mhm.
you want to talk to us, if you want to ask us about something, ask us. You are showing us that you want to hurt us. Because why else would you be charging at us at that speed? And all of us dispersed and ran into different directions. We were running to like save ourselves. Because at that point, we already were aware of the fact that there was a lot of police brutality happening. They even brought out the horses. They had like the, I don't know what they're called, water guns and everything. This time, the response is not like that, which makes me very suspicious, because it makes me think, what is the government planning then, when their response was like that a few years ago and they were very explicit about it and very proud of it, but yet now they're kind of staying, low, keeping their head down. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know that people are not gonna give it up. They're not just gonna get bored and stop going to the protest
No,
and stop
no.
giving the 15-minute silence on the street every day. And that's all I can hope for, is for this to continue. And as people on Instagram say, nobody dare like make the tensions go away, because people are also aware that some people might get bored. So there's now a slogan always posted on Instagram being like, no, keep the tensions high, right? Like keep them, coming. We're not gonna give this up. And I feel like that's a very like good thing to see, is that people are very passionate about what they're like standing up for, and I don't think they'll just give it up because a lot of time has passed and no change was there.
I'm fearing also again my negative approach. I think I definitely agree with her. I think people are very, very, very much motivated to continue the protest as they should be also. But if nothing changes and if government tries to go again on some other way, and if they succeed somehow to stop the protests, I think civil war is gonna happen because people are not gonna give up. Even if half of the people give up, there is then maybe a million others who's gonna stay and who's gonna still be unsatisfied. And I think literally just civil war is gonna happen because the prices in stores are also getting higher. Everything. It's not problem. I mean, it is. Of course, it's a problem that these 15 people have been basically killed in Novi Sad, and it's problem that there's a huge police brutality on the protest. Everything stands, but this is much deeper than that and much bigger than only this. And I think people are being
Yeah.
dissatisfied with their life and with the government for last 20, 30 years. And I think it's literally either now or never.
Ask that question to you because this is not an isolated incident. If I reference the lithium mining, that's if I'm not, is that Jadar Valley? If I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
Yeah.
that
Yes.
was if I'm not mistaken, those protests were going on in August, July or August of 2024. I remember seeing that coverage in Dublin. So to see it in Ireland of what's going on in Serbia, I understand that it's much larger than an isolated incident. So unfortunately, being that it's a regional situation, I must ask, although researchers have said it and some media outlets are saying it, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think that Serbia is closer to an internal conflict now? Do you think that war is more inevitable now, or do you think that will be continued protest?
I personally
This is a
think
very tricky question.
it is a tricky
Yeah, go
question,
ahead,
but I
Sonia.
think people are gonna try to do it calm way. I think,
Mhm.
especially because it's students, we are not aggressive. I don't think. Also, every time when there is a war happening in any country, I feel like it's more government because they have profit from the war. I don't think people want to kill each other. I don't think people want to be rude, mean, harmful. And I think also like these protests, they want to stay calm. They want to do it everything with nice way. But if it reached a point where people are done with everything that's been going on, which I don't know if it's gonna happen. I really hope it's not gonna happen, but I think there is a high possibility of civil war happening or any kind of physical abusement towards the either stores or in general people, because we also already saw that there's a lot of people who are voting for Vucic or who are part of their political party, who are just civilians, who keep attacking people on protests or people who are uh, for the change. And you can see it now when everything is still calm. Those are isolated cases, and it's been only a few of them. But I'm sure it's gonna just keep coming brutality from that side towards protests, and I don't know how much they can keep going. It all depends on what's gonna happen next few months, in my opinion, and then we're gonna see.
But I don't believe, I mean, I like to not believe that war is imminent because in my mind, I would like to, avoid the possibility of the loss of human life, the people being hurt and everything. But I can say that although there's absolutely no call for violence from the students of any of the general public, the only way that I see it going in that way is if the government took very aggressive measures to kind of counter the protests. But I believe that 3 months of protesting on the street and many more to come, at one point the government is gonna have to react because I feel like the protests are getting, just more and more dispersed throughout Serbia. More and more people are attending. They're not going to be able to ignore them for much longer. And now their response is what matters, I believe. But I also had a very interesting conversation with this guy relatively soon. I think it was like while I was in Serbia last time. And he was telling me how he agrees with the protests and how he is, yes, I'm standing in solidarity. But he told me he never actually went to any. And then I was very like weirded out, like, okay, if you're gonna support the movement, why don't you support it by actually joining the protest? Why are you just, full of empty words? And he's like, no, I'm not. I just don't see a point. And I was very confused with his reasoning, but he told me, listen, okay, I'm not gonna cuss because he cussed when he told me, but he basically said, when push comes to shove, I'm there to physically, fight for my country. He's like, if I need to protect you guys who are protesting peacefully, I'm there in the first row. I will not be part of these like walks and everything. I'm there in case something goes south, so I can be there and protect all of you. So there are people who also have that kind of understanding. And I feel like that's why we can't even kind of gauge how many people are actually supporting this movement, because a lot of them don't see that they have to show up, but they share the same opinions. And also this guy, for example, he's not on the protest. She shares the opinions. He wants a change, but he also is kind of expecting it to, turn violent. And that's when he feels that it's his responsibility to show up, and fight. I don't know if it's gonna come to that. I hope it's not. Nobody's calling for it. But there are people who are, willing to take not only, verbal action, they're ready to take physical action to fight what they believe in. So there's a lot of different, people, and the general public, I feel, is way more kind of open towards the idea of, being a bit more radical. But I feel like the students really don't want to get involved in that, and they are like just absolutely saying no violence involved. Now, how it's gonna actually like turn out, we can only, assume.
Yeah.
But I feel like my personal opinion is that it will come to like a boiling point. I am afraid to say, but I believe that there is going to be another situation that's just going to be a slap in the face to the protesters, and they're just going to say, you know what, bye, we can't do this anymore. And I feel like with the girls being ran over, that also kind of stirred the tensions up and everything, and a lot of people undercover, beating protesters up. But then again, even if it comes to like physical altercation, how how are people of Serbia supposed to fight, the police who is on the regime side? Not only the police, even if the policemen who maybe believe and share the same opinions as the protesters turn on the government, there's so many hooligans connected to the regime, and it's a very
Yeah.
well-known fact that our regime is very like interacts a lot with football hooligans and leaders of certain clans, of shady businesses happening. And you
Mm.
had the Jovanjica scandal with the weed plant and their involvement with big politicians in Serbia and in North Macedonia. You have our politicians plagiarizing their PhDs. You have a part of Belgrade being just demolished overnight and nobody knows who did it. And you have so many scandals that happened that I'm surprised that we're still like not seeing any change, and seeing them realize that they need to change their ways a bit. They're doing the same thing. They don't care that everybody knows about those scandals. As I said, they're just playing in our faces, like. And I feel like the general population of Serbia is kind of fed up, and will go through, like, we'll try to go through the official channels, try to go for reform of the whole system with institutions, trying to seek, justice via the legal routes and everything. And I feel like that can work maybe, but that's the thing. We don't know how deep the corruption is. Like, it has roots everywhere now. So you don't even know if you'll be able to, gain what you seek through the good means. Because if somebody's playing dirty and you're playing fair, you can't really win. You're not playing
No.
the same game, in
No.
my opinion. So I can just, be optimistic and happy that I see this sentiment and this atmosphere that's indescribable, of unity, of standing together, of wanting freedom, of wanting change. I hope it doesn't, actually evolve into violence. But at the same time, it's kind of something that we need to be prepared for, because it is the worst case scenario. And I feel like a lot of people have it in the back of their minds, but we just don't want to accept it, because that's not what we are about. We are not about violence. We are not about, anything of the sort. But it's being in the back of our minds shows that we just don't know what to expect for the government, and we don't know if the government will come at us. And yeah, but if it does, I think it's gonna be a defensive reaction, not an like
Oh,
avert attack.
definitely, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with
definitely
what
not.
she said.
Yeah.
But I'm just scared because I think the most powerful people in Serbia are the ones who are most corrupted. And like she said, if you have a lot of if you have a lot of us who are just civilians, and then you have 10 powerful people who are corrupted, who can do actually something more than we can, we lose. We're not playing the same game.
No, and I
Yeah.
think your strength is in your numbers. And if I look at how many
Absolutely.
people are now peacefully demonstrating, um, I think it also shows a lot of restraint.
Yes.
It also shows that the heart is at the right place, because you're doing this in a non-violent way, which is very, I would say, admirable to say the least. Um, but then there is the moment that I think every couple of years you will have elections again. And I don't know when the next elections are planned for in Serbia, if they are regular elections every give or take 4 years, or not.
No.
Since I've been
Yeah.
alive, basically. But I feel like there's so many conspiracies happening, and it's very interesting to hear what the more conspiratorial among us have to say. There are people who say that all of these politicians, like this was the craziest theory that I heard, is that they're just trying to stay in power until the expo that is happening, because that's where they can, launder a lot of money, and that they're just going to disappear. The one person just told me that. They said, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
I think this is going to happen. Because if we go through the legal routes and there is a change, there's so many people in our government that are going to be, that should be prosecuted, and how are we going to deal with the political core of a country being in jail? They're not going to allow that. They don't want to go to jail,
Yeah.
but the things that they did and the ways they broke the law are very well documented. It's just that our institutions don't really function right now. So they are still, out and about doing the same thing. But if we do see a change and the institutions actually start doing what they're supposed to be doing, I feel like there's some politicians that are gonna be, on the front lines, just like being exposed as the frauds and as the manipulators, corrupted figures that they are. But then again, I don't think that can necessarily lead to this widespread outrage. Like, we know Donald Trump was, all of his shenanigans and what he did and him actually being convicted, and yet it didn't change anything in the minds of the people. People are still, on the side, knowing that he was convicted, and knowing a lot of things about, the, call it an attempted insurrection, call it whatever you want, but the
People like the freak
kind of
show.
interrupted the kind of interrupted transfer of power, not only impacting Serbia, it is kind of seeping into other surrounding countries. We see our neighbors from Croatia, from Bosnia, Montenegro showing support, but also using the same practices, because we had a general strike where we decided not to actually buy any goods from the big, conglomerates and big companies that are just really ripping the people off. And then I saw the same thing happening in Croatia and in other countries, our neighboring countries. So you see that this is kind of, gaining traction, and that our Balkan neighbors are also unsatisfied with the state of affairs in their countries. And it did actually bear fruit. I think in Croatia, some prices were actually reduced, and
A lot of them. No, we
exactly.
had,
So it is
yeah.
actually fruitful.
Yeah.
So
No, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, we had in Croatia, I think for 60%, all those big change have reduced the prices. Of course, it's so far. I don't know if they're gonna go back up and everything, but I mean, we did the general strike for the whole week for one chain, and then next week is another chain, and then they stop buying certain products, for example, like Coca-Cola, for the certain period of time, and they try not to support big chains because, like she said, yeah, the prices in Croatia are higher than the price in Netherlands. The salary is also around 900 euros, and the prices are higher than the Netherlands, which has what, 2,500 euros average of salary, which is
there's a
huge
slight-
difference. Yes,
there's a
and it's all
difference,
because it's all because we saw Serbian people do it, and we saw that okay, maybe we should also do some change. And I think the same with Bosnia and Montenegro. Also, Slovakia protests about their government. I think a lot of other countries are going to be awoke now, especially the one who have
Yeah.
similar regimes as ours.
So basically, what we're seeing is that your government, although that there are elections, are not really listening to what the population want, up until the population itself basically is just standing up and saying, "Well, this is the line. You will not cross this line," and then they back down. Do you think that, let's say, for example, there will be a moment within the next 6 months that the current administration will step down and there will be new elections, that the students will be able to organize themselves in such a manner that they could represent this movement as well politically? Because we talked about the political alternatives, and you were pretty straight about that they're not really there. But let's say the moment comes, in half a year from now. Will the students be able to organize? Will there be a representation?
I don't know. I think Vucic is very much unpredictable in these scenarios. I hope they're gonna be like opportunity for new elections, for example. but I actually don't know. I feel like it's a very tricky question. It really just, in my opinion, depends on what's going to happen in the next few months. And if there is a chance for new elections, I also don't know how are they going to be organized. New elections either for the whole government or only for the president, or I'm not sure how deep that goes in or how hard it is to even just make a new elections. Who, because Vucic has the whole power. He's the one who is saying, okay, we have new elections, or him and his government are the one who are giving orders about it. And I don't know how people who are not part of that organizations can have influence and be like, yeah, but we want elections today.
Yeah.
So I'm maybe not just
I mean,
educated about that.
yes, but I also feel like we saw two resignations. I think Vučićević resigned from his role, and another one I forgot which one. So there are government officials stepping down to kind of take ownership of the fact that this tragedy happened. But I feel like they're kind of, I don't know how to say this in like a polite way, but they're kind of sacrificing the small fish.
Yes,
I
yes.
feel like they will be pushing the people who did not have that big of an influence and played such a big role in the very like functioning of the government, but they're kind of trying to keep themselves afloat by sacrificing those who are like below them in that kind of power change and power structure that we have in Serbia. But as Sonia said, even if there were elections, first of all, if Aleksandar Vučić steps down, and with him maybe Ana Brnabić. My first idea would be if he steps down, then Ana Brnabić is going to be president, and then he's going to be the prime minister, because that's the type of manipulation they're used to doing. But
That's
if
what
they
they're doing
all
so far.
actually, if they all just like, okay, we're going, that's half of our, government. And then I feel like this transitional period that we're talking about cannot be good. When you have a country that's coming out of 30 years of like first, the 90s and everything that happened then with our radical government with Milosevic, and then the people who are from the same cloth now being in power, the people like of Serbia are traumatized, because nobody deserves to be, played with in such a manner and to have to fight for their existence in that way, and to kind of have to sacrifice their ideas and morals in order to, be part of the regime in order to get a job. Or you need to go to this protest, this pro-regime protest, or you're going to lose your job. Lord forbid you have a government job and you're seen at the protest. You can be fired. So like there's so many things happening that in my opinion, I feel like the government I would like to see after this one is one made out of, professionals in that field. If you're going to run the Department of Education, you need to be educated on the Department of Education. You need to know what you're talking about, because we have people from such different fields who don't actually have expertise in the departments that they're heading, And I feel like in that initial period, it's the professors of universities, it's the, the doctors, the everything that should be there with the students to kind of, form this transitional government until we figure it out. But that is a slippery slope. That's a tricky thing. And I feel like we as people are kind of prepared and feel like it's worth doing. Like this kind of fake stability that we have right now is not enough. We would much rather have this certain, like a transitional period that's going to certainly be uncertain than have whatever we're having right now happening. I would much prefer knowing that we did the right thing and that we're starting fresh, even if that starting fresh entails carrying 30 years of dirt and corruption and mishandling of funds on our backs, knowing that we got rid of what was killing our nation. And I feel like maybe a lot of people share the same sentiment of wanting to start over and being willing to take all the pain and all the like suffering onto themselves and say, okay, this is better than staying in this fake, stable, Serbia is an economic giant, economic tiger mindset. Because that's also what Vučić said. He called Serbia a tiger of economy, like an economic tiger, which is hilarious, knowing that people are struggling to make their ends meet. But yeah.
Do you think there is a role for the diaspora as well? Serbian
Role
diaspora?
role in the elections, or
Well, just I would say there are a lot of Serbs outside of Serbia that are following what is happening, and let's say that push comes to shove, and this moment really appears in which you can do a system reset basically and start building everything up from anew. Do you think the Serbian diaspora could do something in that as well, or should they?
I think if there is a new government, and if, like you said, everything is very positive, the half of diaspora will go back, first of all, to the
Yeah.
country. And I think they will have a huge role. They can have, I think they can even have maybe bigger role than people who are right now in the country, because those are educated people who have connections, who can maybe talk to some embassies of their cities, their countries, their states if they're in America. And I think everything starts from them, actually. Every big change. I don't think this protest would be even known if Serbian people or people who come to those protests, if they're other nationality, started doing that outside of Serbia. Because I think that was the reaching point where people started finding out about those stuff. But that's how Dutch media started to show about protests, because they saw protests in Amsterdam and we were like, oh, this is something new. I think the same for maybe America, well, for Europe mostly, maybe. I saw also that Zanzibar had a protest, and then Zanzibar News made a article about Serbian protests and Serbia and what is happening now in Serbia. So I think the diaspora is actually playing a huge part in it.
And I feel like being represented in the international community, us who are abroad, kind of have this, in my opinion, role to show that Serbia is not this backwards Balkan country that is like so rotten from the inside. Because I feel like a lot of people in Western Europe kind of view us as, they view us through these lenses of the media. And what do you see in the media? The Serbian people are always represented as the mafia, the criminals, the smugglers, the armed assailants, and I don't know, hitmen. And
Rude,
I feel like,
sneaky.
yeah, and we don't speak English, and with this and with that, there's a lot of stereotypes about us. And I feel like the role of the diaspora is to kind of show the international community what Serbia is about. Serbia is about, integrity. We have smart people. We have very talented people everywhere in all sectors. And I feel like if we were to actually come in contact with Serbia, for example, right now we're having this conversation because we met at the protest, and we're having this voice because we were the diaspora present in Amsterdam at that day. And now we have the opportunity to talk about what's happening in Serbia to you. And maybe somebody listens to this podcast and learns something new, or hears about a case they might want to look into more, and I feel like that's the power of the diaspora, is the networking that we can do here, with of course some people maybe eventually wanting to go back. Also funding, a lot of the diaspora actually provides funding to NGOs that they want to support, and maybe they can aid in that way as well. So I feel like the diaspora and the home population kind of work together and kind of push each other up. But I feel like the main kind of, I'm gonna say, burden currently is on the people who are in Serbia. And we as the diaspora are not in the spotlight and shouldn't be in the spotlight. We're here to kind of give an echo to their voices and show the international community maybe about what's happening, and speaking, educating people, and just standing united with our fellow citizens. But aside from that, I feel like, who am I to claim some role in this when I'm in the Netherlands studying at my very expensive university, and I'm very privileged. So all I can do now is just be there for my people and kind of echo what they're saying and try my best to represent the country in the best way possible. And that is the role I see for myself. But I don't know, maybe other people in the diaspora see it a different way. There are people who are against the protests in the diaspora very, very actively. There's a group called Serbs, Srbi u Holandiji, Serbs in the Netherlands. And I think that somebody sent an invite to the protests in Rotterdam, and there was an argument that broke out in the comments. in the Facebook comments. They're like, what do you think you can change? Oh, the Dutch government knows how to deal with the type of people that you are when you show up
Oh,
on the
really?
streets.
Yeah.
So like even the diaspora is not united, although it is overwhelmingly like in opposition to the regime. There are people who are, still pro-government and pro-Vucic and are very harsh towards the people who are standing, in solidarity with the students.
Yeah. And let's say, for example, now somebody is listening to this podcast and they go like, hey, I really want to show support to the students in Serbia. What can they do from abroad? Be it Serbian diaspora or just anybody. Where can they find the right information, for example? Because it's not going to be on the main media.
Main media is not going to have it.
No.
Absolutely not. I feel like the best approach to this is like the first thing that they can do is educate themselves on what is happening, whether they are Serbian diaspora or come from some other part of the world, just so they kind of have an insight in what's happening. And that includes, having the wider context and kind of reading up on it and maybe spreading the word. But another thing they can do is actually support these organizations through, going to their Instagram accounts and their Facebook accounts. They have, their donation links as well exist. I can't tell you the exact links, but I can tell you, I can send you some of the pages that if you might want to include the links to them.
Yes.
After we publish this podcast. So there are ways to help, but I feel like solidarity means a lot to the students there, because they see that they're fighting and they're not fighting alone. And back in Serbia, people send them money. There's donation happening, not only money but food, water, because they're blocking the universities. They're sleeping there, they're living at the universities, and there's always like during the 15-minute silence that's happening in my like part of town, there's always a section where you can put water, food, sweets, whatever you want to do to donate to the students. So there's like huge, not fundraising, but kind of fundraising actions that are happening. And you can maybe take part of that. You can maybe reach out to some of the student organizations, and maybe if you want to like send them some candy or send them some food or whatever, they are not asking for money. They're asking for support. And they're like, I feel like if you send them like a gift from abroad, they're going to be so, happy to see that somebody actually cares enough about Serbia and what they're doing to support them in whichever way possible.
Yeah, I agree with everything what she said. I also think just word of mouth is the best approach, because the more people know about it, the more people, education, unfortunately, is only through social media. Or if maybe the country where they come from, if they publish something, which I don't think it's the case, but if they do, maybe they have the right information. I feel like they should be selected. They should read everything they see on English if they are not native speakers, and then select the information that they want to choose. I know that TikTok and Instagram has a lot of group chats or like a lot of sites, a lot of comments. They publish a lot in every language about Serbian protests. And then I think just sharing, reposting, talking about it to people, and maybe then someone knows some very important people who can help us, who can also share, who can do a change, hopefully in Serbia. But of course, like any change is good, or any comment is good. Maybe they know someone who can publicly talk about it, like for example this podcast, and then some people can find out about it. I feel like we just need to have bigger community right now in general. Yeah.
I love it. Any last words for the podcast?
I mean, I would just like to thank you guys, honestly. Yeah, very grateful. I feel like both of us are here to, spread the word, as Sonia was saying. And I feel like you giving us the opportunity to do this in English, first and foremost, to maybe provide your listeners with a perspective that they have not heard yet, or some information that they were not aware of, and to do it in such a way that we're not censored, that we are able to speak our mind, and kind of fight in a way for what we believe in and fight for change in our country. And our fight here is happening through words and through this podcast and maybe some other podcast or whatever, the future brings. But I feel very grateful to have been here today. And thank you for listening, and thank you for caring. Thank you for caring enough to, take some time out of your day to listen to two Serbian students yap for 2 hours about everything that they're unhappy with. So yeah, thank you very much.
No,
Yeah,
I also feel very blessed, very thankful to even be part of this. I had so much fun though. And I think, yeah, like she said, I feel like this is how we fight against our government or against anything that we're not happy about it. It's through vocalizing it. And thank you, yes, for having the opportunity to do it to do it in English. So many more people are aware to listen to it, to be informed, to be educated about it. And like she said, thank you for caring.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want our listeners to know that it is an act of protest and there are changes being made. There is pressure. The prime minister resigned, your minister of
Yeah.
construction resigned, the minister of trade resigned, the mayor of Novi Sad resigned. And if I'm not mistaken, there are a series of other governmental officials who are facing massive pressure, high-ranking governmental officials and
Yes.
associated with China's Belt and Road Initiative within Serbia to resign. So we see the change. It's a little, but it needs to work and it needs to happen. It's consistent. So yeah, definitely do not stop. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that, like you both stated, it's been going on for decades. And I think
Yeah.
all the force that was used to build up the situation as it is right now also takes, an equal force as well to push it back. So
Mhm.
that's why I think these peaceful protests are also very important, because it builds up an equal amount of force to undo all of that which has been done, which has been not good for Serbia and its people. So in that sense, yeah, just keep on going, I would say.
Yes, I'm very proud of you.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Thank you for
you.
the
And this was
support.
so much fun.
As we close out on today's episode, it's clear that the protests in Serbia are not just a political event. They're a powerful expression of what the people demand, which is change and accountability. This conversation is just the beginning. And we hope that it encourages everyone to keep learning and staying engaged with global movements. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Roundtable Podcast. Feel free to reach out to us. Our email is info@ciris.info. That's info@ciris.info. Provide us with your comments, suggestions, or if you wish to be a guest on one of our future episodes. Follow our podcast for more insightful conversations. And until next time, keep exploring the world of global security and policy.